I hope so. I hope one day when I do meet Rose, and I think I will, I can tell her we got it right. I hope so. Right. Questions and answers. There are going to be some wonderfully intelligent questions, and I'll try to do the best I can in terms of answer. And put your hands up, please, and I'll choose people, and we'll begin with this young man here, who's the first.
First, as a member of the pro-choice, we'd like to thank you for coming and sharing your ideas.
Thank you very much.
My question to you is, you outlined the days of development in childbirth. I was wondering what your position is on somebody who has been raped the next day, whether or not they should be allowed to have an abortion.
Thank you for what you said, by the way. I think it's very valuable that we can discuss. May I ask you, I will answer this. Do you believe then that apart from in cases of rape, abortion is wrong?
Yes.
You do? So that's not really a pro-choice position, is it? So you believe abortion is wrong apart from in the case of rape?
I believe it is wrong, but I also believe in the person's choice.
Okay.
I do not believe in government enforcement.
Okay. The reason I ask that is because, and this is no way to criticize you, but I wish I had not $1, but maybe $1,000 for every time the first question is rape or incest or life of the mother. Now, these make up, as I'm sure you know, 90% of abortion. And if the only abortion in the world were in the cases of rape, incest, and life of the mother, I wouldn't be talking about this issue right now. Now, that isn't to say I approve of those cases. And there are people who will say, how dare he should just say immediately, of course, it's absolutely wrong. I'm being quite absolutely straight. I could not look into the case of a woman who'd been raped and say you have to have that child. Now, I'm in a way I'm being inconsistent here. It's a unique life. And the baby has done nothing wrong. I know a woman whose father was the rapist. She was raped. Her mother was raped. And I wouldn't say to her, well, you shouldn't have been born, but I'm being candid with you. There's an inconsistency, but I'm not here to deny it. I could not look into the eyes of a woman who'd just been raped and say, you must have that baby. So am I running away from the issue? To a certain degree, I suppose. But if the only abortions were in the cases of rape, incest, and life to the mother, it wouldn't be an issue because there would be so few of them. And in the third world, they wouldn't be an issue at all, where we're having a population control policy.
Where are your sources?
And hold on a minute. The other question you are, and by the way, life of the mother, of course, is entirely valid point to make if it's equal life. The other point you made, I think, is a very good one. It's a basic philosophical point. And I understand, you say, look, I don't approve of abortion, but I don't think it's my right to stop someone having one. Okay. This is what I hear, in fact, most of the time. This is what I hear most of the time from people. You know, most people, on the fringes, there are people who say, abortion is absolutely wrong. It's wrong. On the other fringe, there are people who say, choice. The vast bulk of people just say, you know what, I wouldn't, I don't like it, but I'm not going to interfere, it's not my position to. You know, that's a reasonable position to take.
Sure.
But.
Then one question at a time, please.
But the problem here, and it's a jarring one for us, because we don't really want to be involved in this. If you saw, you're a good guy, if you saw someone having the living daylights kicked out of them outside, now, you might not be a hero and rush in, but you'd get people involved. Stop this. They must stop. You wouldn't say, well, it is, I don't know, it's a choice issue. Now, it's never so crass in the case of abortion because there are pressures on a woman, there are fears. Although, let's be quite honest, before we play the Pollyanna thing here, a lot of abortions are because I just don't want to at this particular time, and if you look at some of the reasons why, and the second and third abortion, and often these are middle-class women, and I also resent the fact very much that working-class people are having to pay taxes to fund something which sometimes very well want to take advantage of. But, so I don't think, it's not a morally neutral position of I don't approve, but I wouldn't. It's a position of I disapprove because. I mean, let me ask you, why do you disapprove of it?
Just as you said, I believe that life begins when you are conceived. You
Yeah.
are alive. But I also feel that I shouldn't be forcing life choices on another person, especially the government.
Yeah, leave government aside, because I have concerns about that. You would agree that there's maybe a bit of a contradiction there, because you're saying it is a life, but I'm not going to save it. Is that at all worrying for you?
To an extent.
I think, you're being very honest. I share your view of government. I'm not a libertarian. I believe it's a place for government. I think it should be a reduced place. And I certainly don't want government arresting people for these actions. I do want, as I said, I think it will be a reasonable first step, no public funding, and an informed debate and discussion on the issue, without people being, and you have done this before, without people being labelled or attacked or condemned or accused of doing all sorts of things because they have one position or the other. I do think, however, though, if it is a life, it has to be saved. If it isn't, I mean, if it's not a life, then it really is irrelevant. I mean, if you really shoot cosmetic surgery, if you want an organ removed, I don't know why you would, but that's entirely up to you. But this is a separate, autonomous, distinct life, as science does prove. That's why I think, even though it's very uncomfortable, we do have to at least change the climate where we realize it is human life and abortion is not good. Now, the step to then have government imposing its view is very different. And let's be quite honest here, it ain't going to happen. You know, it's not even part of the purview, is it? It's really about just saying, can we actually debate the issue without being silent? And I'm allowed to come here. We have, in many universities in Canada now, pro-life clubs losing their funding. We have pro-life clubs not being allowed to meet on campus. And of course, anyone who believes in freedom of speech would say this is wrong, because it is wrong. So again, we have debate being silenced, and we have consequence of you being closed down. And that, I believe, is unacceptable in a society that claims to be free. Thank you, that was a very first question. There's a woman at the back of the barrier.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, so you were talking about, I don't really agree you've got these reasons, but the reasons why a woman would choose to have an abortion. All things that you're saying. So, for instance, I can't afford a child right now, so we would rather have the baby, have her birth the baby, raise the baby, have the child raised in poverty, possibly with unfit parents who aren't.
Okay, good question. Did everybody hear that? Yeah? Good question. Question is, you said the baby should be born, and it could be born in poverty, terrible conditions, awful conditions. You don't know me, but honestly, I'm not a complete... I mean, I really don't want anyone to live in terrible conditions. The adoption waiting lists are so long, you would weep. You're a compassionate person. You would weep if you saw people waiting to adopt children. My sister-in-law being one of them. It's why people go to Romania, why they go to China. It's why they go into... People going to Haiti now, good, I mean, for good, the best reasons, but also they're so desperate to raise a child. The adoption waiting lists are massively long. I would never say to a woman, you have to raise that child. How can I say to a woman who can't afford to live, who may have a mental health issue? By the way, that's one thing I want to say, I would never take a child away from someone who has mental health challenges just because of that. And that's happening sometimes, it's outrageous, you never do that. As long as the child is safe, they should be there. But I'm not saying you have to. And what I'm saying is, you can't kill the child. There are all sorts of people are desperately waiting to adopt children. I don't know the figures in Kingston, but in Toronto, in Ottawa, I mean, there are so many people who are waiting to adopt, and they can't. And it's increasingly difficult. And there's no such thing as an unwanted child. There are mothers who can't raise their children. I fully understand that. Of course, there are people like that. There are women in terribly difficult situations. And there used to be an edge to the pro-life movement that I like to refer to as anti-abortion rather than pro-life. You see what I mean? You know, abortion was the issue. At that point, it's over. No. At birth, there's a whole life ahead. And we have to think about a medical system that will take care of that mother and child without huge insurance having to be paid and so on. We have to think about a society that is peaceful and civilized. So it doesn't end with the child being born. Now, I would... So that used to be a certain age to the anti-abortion movement. It's grown up a lot since then. I can only speak for myself, not for others, but I don't think I'm alone in this. I mentioned the phrase seamless garment, from conception to natural death. That child and that mother to be taken care of, and if the mother can't take care of the child, you give birth to this child. I would hope not the state, I'd hope more an individual family would adopt. Maybe even short term. Some of the finest people I've ever met in my life are emergency foster parents. These are people, I'm sure you have in this city, right? Without any doubt, actually, I know, who take in children for a brief period of time. And you can imagine how heartbreaking this is because they take the child in, they fall in love with the child, If it all turns out right, 4 months later the child goes back to the parent. You must be heartbreaking. You have to have a safety net. You have to have that love and compassion. So I'm not saying live in poverty. No, I don't like poverty. I'm not saying the mother has to raise the child. I'm saying the child has a right to be born. And the notion that if the child is in a poor community, it has less of a right to be born than the child born in a rich community, I find to be hideous. I really do. As someone who grew up in not poverty, but in a very basic way, I find it deeply offensive. I'm not saying you're suggesting this, but deeply offensive that a child who is conceived to wealthy parents has more of a right to be born and more chance of being born than a child born to a poor parent. Thank you. Very good question. Thank you.
So
Okay.
Is the system broken? Because there's so many
Oh,
children
yeah.
in orphanages who never get adopted.
Oh, well, I'm not sure if that's true.